I don't have it written in front of me. I'm not going to necessarily remember it specifically. You summarized it earlier.
Then how is it? No. Then how is it that you claim that that case is not made when you don't even know what the argument is?
No. Okay. I first of all, I think it's wow. All right. I've spent most of my life studying this stuff and dealing with it. The fact that I'm not going to be able, when you rattle off 10 arguments in your opening and in a span of 10 minutes, it's not like you gave much substance, and you certainly didn't give any definition, and you did not provide any actual evidence. For you to then suggest that I'm somehow failing because I can't regurgitate after giving my opening.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Genuinely glad you are here for this one, because this might be one of the most interesting conversations I have put in front of you in a while. So what we have here is Matt Dillahunty, one of the most well-known voices in atheist debate circles, going head-to-head with Michael Egnor, a neurosurgeon and committed Catholic who believes the case for God is not just strong. He thinks it is basically unanswerable, and the moment these two actually lock in on each other, things get tense fast. We are talking about one side coming in with 10 arguments fired off in rapid succession, and the other side refusing to let that slide without accountability. Do yourself a favor and stay with this one all the way through, because the exchange that unfolds is not what either side expected, and the moment it shifts is something you genuinely do not want to miss. Also, I am really curious where in the world you are watching this from right now. Drop your city or country down in the comments. It always blows me away seeing how far this reaches. All right, let us get into it.
If it's okay, Matt mentioned a number of points in his summary, and I think that would be a bad place to start, is to start talking about some of the things that Matt mentioned.
I'll just let you decide wherever you want to start. I'm sure we'll wander around all over the place.
Okay. Well, first of all, you mentioned that you don't defend the existence of leprechauns and fairies. Of course, I don't either. The arguments for God's existence are of entirely different nature. So Christians don't believe that leprechauns and fairies exist either. The burden of proof is on all of us. That is that the reality is that the vast majority of people in human history, including the vast majority of the best minds, the best philosophers, the best scientists, have been theists. So the argument that atheists don't have anything to prove is nonsense. The nature is full of evidence, massive evidence, for a mind, for intellect behind it, and for atheists to say, "Oh, I don't have to prove that's not real," is nonsense. We all have a burden of proof in this, and you can't just kind of run out on it. You have to prove your case. I have to prove mine. And
my case is that you haven't proved your case.
What is my case? What is Aquinas' first way?
You are defending
Matt. What is Aquinas' first way? Tell me it.
What is Aquinas' first way?
Yeah.
That's essentially a first mover. It's an argument from change.
What is the argument?
I don't have it written in front of me. I'm not going to necessarily remember it specifically. You summarized it earlier.
Then how is it? No. Then how is it that you claim that that case is not made when you don't even know what the argument is?
No. Okay. I first of all, I think it's wow. All right. I've spent most of my life studying this stuff and dealing with it. The fact that I'm not going to be able, when you rattle off 10 arguments in your opening and in a span of 10 minutes, it's not like you gave much substance, and you certainly didn't give any definition, and you did not provide any actual evidence. For you to then suggest that I'm somehow failing because I can't regurgitate after giving my opening an argument from Aquinas that others have dealt with, when what we're talking about at this particular point is the burden of proof. Now,
which one of the arguments that I gave you do you understand? Which arguments?
Let's just assume. Are you going to let me answer? Question. Are you going to? If you ask me a question and I start to answer it,
of 1 through 10.
If you ask me a question and I start to, am I going to get to answer your question? Let's assume that I don't understand any of them.
All right. So then why do you think they're wrong?
Well, I've evaluated each of them at different times and found them wanting. When someone
claims, you understand them, but you forgot them.
This is the moment where you see exactly what kind of debate this is going to be. And I need you to pay close attention, because what just happened in this opening exchange tells you everything about the strategy Michael Egnor brought to this conversation. Michael opens by saying that the burden of proof is on everyone, not just on the person making the claim, on everyone. And to support that, he says something genuinely fascinating. He points out that the vast majority of people in human history, including the vast majority of the best minds, the best philosophers, and best scientists, have been theists. Now hold on, because that argument has a name. It is called an appeal to majority. And the reason it is a logical fallacy is actually really important to understand here. The fact that most people throughout history believe something has absolutely no bearing on whether that thing is true. For most of recorded human history, the overwhelming consensus was that the Earth was the center of the universe. The smartest people alive believed it. Institutions defended it. And they were completely wrong. Consensus is not evidence. Popularity is not proof. But here is where it gets really interesting. Michael then turns directly to Matt and demands he recite Aquinas' first way on the spot, right there, in the middle of a live debate, immediately after Matt just finished his own opening statement. And when Matt says he does not have it written in front of him, Michael jumps on it like he just won the debate. And Matt's response is the part that stopped me, because Matt does not panic, he does not scramble. He looks straight at this and says, you rattled off 10 arguments in your opening, and in a span of 10 minutes, it's not like you gave much substance, and you certainly didn't give any definition. And he is absolutely right. You cannot sprint through 10 philosophical arguments in 13 minutes with zero substance and then demand your opponent perform a perfect recitation of each one on command. That is not a debate. That is a trap. The strategy shifted from building a case to testing the opponent's recall. Those are two completely different objectives, and only one of them actually addresses the question on the table.
Yes, we'll go ahead and go with that. Okay. I don't know why. See, the whole point of tonight's debate is to demonstrate that a God exists. And all I did was point out about where a burden of proof is, and you immediately start to suggest that I don't understand what I'm talking about, which may be fine and it may be fair, but it doesn't do anything to prove you're God. If you think that you proved your God by rattling off short intro to philosophy versions of arguments that have long been debated, you don't understand the robustness of this.
Matt, I'll be happy to give you these arguments in detail. What I want to establish before that is that your arguments are not based on any actual knowledge. You don't know the arguments for God's existence. So your claim,
which of my arguments do you reject? The argument from divine hiddenness is the only one I presented. The argument from divine hiddenness isn't based on an understanding of any of your arguments. So please tell me where my argument is.
Your argument is that God's existence has not been proven.
Correct.
You don't understand the arguments for God's existence.
No, sir.
Hasn't been proven.
Okay.
Tell me Aquinas' second way. What's the second way?
The argument from causation, and it has to do with causal chains. But there's a problem with causal chains because you cannot demonstrate that causal chains extend beyond. We can't explore the universe prior to the Planck time. And so the fact that there are causal chains within the universe don't mean that there are causal chains out of the universe that operate in the same way. As a matter of fact, if you start talking about something that exists outside of time, you've already made an error because existence is necessarily temporal. It doesn't mean anything to say that something exists for no period of time.
That has nothing to do with Aquinas' second way or his first way or anything.
Well, I didn't show up to debate Aquinas, and he's not here to defend it. So either you can tell me, you can either debate it and tell me I'm wrong, or you can just assert that I'm wrong, which is what you've done from the beginning. You've made nothing but assertions. Here's a whole bunch of arguments. I'm going to assert that these arguments make the case, and I'm going to do no work. That's what you did from the start.
The argument that I'm making is actually fairly simple, and colloquially, it can be said, I'm arguing that you're blowing smoke. I'm
not the one blowing smoke.
I'm arguing that you don't understand the arguments for God's existence, yet you have rejected them. which is the same sort of ignorance that you accuse Christians of.
No, sir. As I pointed out in my opening, I gave my reason for not believing. And my reason for not believing was not, I studied these 10 arguments and found them wanting and left them alone. As a matter of fact, I specifically pointed out that the argument from personal incredulity fallacy would prevent me from doing that, which is why I gave the argument that I gave. So you're now accusing me of the very thing that I absolutely did not do and defended against from the outset.
Have you ever studied the arguments for God's existence, the 10 that I told you, which are classic arguments that have been around for thousands of years? Have you ever studied them?
Yes.
And so you forgot them? Is that the point?
No. Each one of these we can go through and have a discussion about, but you didn't really present them. You presented the cliff notes. I'm going to dump out a whole bunch of stuff. You didn't provide anything of substance. You just rattled off what they were.
Matt, Matt.
You have to understand what is actually happening in this section, because on the surface, it looks like two people arguing about Aquinas. But what is really happening is Matt exposing a fundamental problem with how this entire debate was set up. Matt says it plainly. The whole point of tonight's debate is to demonstrate that a God exists, and all he did was point out where the burden of proof is. And Michael immediately responds by suggesting Matt does not understand what he is talking about. Think about that for a second. Instead of presenting evidence, instead of building a case, the response to the burden of proof argument is a personal challenge on Matt's knowledge level. That is not a rebuttal. That is a deflection. And here is what blows my mind about this exchange. Michael actually says to Matt, "You don't understand the robustness of this," as if the problem here is that Matt just needs a better education. But Matt is not sitting here confused about philosophy. Matt is sitting here asking a very specific question. Where is the evidence? And instead of answering that question, the conversation keeps redirecting to whether Matt has memorized enough Aquinas to deserve a response. Then comes the moment that I think is the most revealing part of this entire segment. Matt fires back and says, "You've made nothing but assertions. Here's a whole bunch of arguments. I'm going to assert that these arguments make the case, and I'm going to do no work." And that line landed because it is true. Walking into a debate and listing argument names is not the same as making those arguments. Listing the titles of 10 books is not the same as reading them. You cannot present the label of a philosophical proof and then treat the label itself as the proof. That is not how reasoning works. That is not how any of this works. And the reason this matters so much is because this pattern shows up constantly in these kinds of conversations. Someone lists a collection of classical arguments, presents them as if their mere existence settles the question, and then when challenged, they pivot to questioning the challenger's credentials. Matt saw it immediately, and he named it out loud for everyone watching.
Pick one, and I would be happy to discuss it with you, but this is some gotcha stuff.
I didn't present them for a reason, okay? It wasn't accidental that I didn't present them in detail. I didn't present them in detail because I wanted to hear what you knew about them.
As I've said,
and I'm hearing that very, very clearly.
As I've said, I'm happy to discuss them, but my ignorance or misunderstanding is irrelevant to whether or not a God exists, and that's the subject of the debate.
Well, your ignorance isn't irrelevant to the debate.
It is. It is ignorant.
It's quite relevant to the debate. You are denying God's existence, and you have not engaged the arguments for his existence, which seems to me to be an argument from your ignorance. Which is what I find with, I don't know a single new atheist who knows any of these arguments.
Okay.
All you guys blow smoke constantly.
I'm sorry that you're upset at all of us, but here's the facts. I've been hosting a TV show on this, taking calls from everybody, and done countless debates. If you go back through the debates that I've done, you will see me addressing many of these arguments, because unlike some people, some debate opponents actually show up with an argument and present it, and then we have a discussion about it. Instead of, here's 10 arguments in rapid fire. What do you think? Which one would you like to discuss? Because if your entire plan, hang on, let me finish. If your plan here tonight is to demonstrate the truth of your proposition, or the proposition you accept, that God exists, by showing that I don't understand something. That is itself a logical fallacy, and that's not going to work either.
No, the fact that you don't understand the arguments is obvious. And it raises the question of how is it that you can reject them if you don't know what they are?
I did not. So wow. Okay.
Okay. So let's start with the first argument, Aquinas' first way. Okay. Aquinas, and this actually comes from Aristotle, observed that change happens in nature.
Yes.
Which we all agree. Change happens.
I agree that we can describe what's happening in nature as change.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that. Sure.
The Aristotelian understanding of change is that there is a state called potency, which is that things can have the possibility of changing, but not the actuality. And then there's a state of actuality.
And Aristotle's word for that was intellect. But
no,
keep going.
No, it had nothing to do with intellect.
No, I didn't say intellect. I said entelechy. E-N-T-E-L-E-C-H-Y.
Well, even that wasn't it.
That is about something coming into its potential of being. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, so although entelechy referred more to teleology, that there was an inherent teleology of things. So there are possibilities and there are actualities, and they don't cross over. That is, that something that's possible, by definition, is not yet actual.
This is the line that the entire segment was building toward. And I need you to really sit with it. Matt says, my ignorance or misunderstanding is irrelevant to whether or not a God exists, and that's the subject of the debate. That is one of the cleanest and most precise things said in this entire conversation, because he is absolutely right. Whether Matt has memorized every argument Aquinas ever wrote has zero bearing on whether God actually exists. Those are two completely separate questions. You could find someone who has never heard of Aquinas in their entire life, and that person's ignorance would not make God any more or less real. The existence of God is not determined by whether Matt passed a philosophy exam. And then Michael responds with something genuinely worth examining. He says Matt is denying God's existence and has not engaged the arguments, and that this is an argument from ignorance. But here's the problem with that. Matt is not making an argument from ignorance. Matt is pointing out that he has not yet been given a reason to believe. There is a massive difference between saying I don't believe because I haven't seen evidence versus saying something doesn't exist because I can't imagine it. One is a reasonable epistemic position. The other is a fallacy. And that distinction got blurred in this moment. What this exchange shows is that the method of how you argue matters just as much as what you are arguing. When someone shifts from here is my evidence to you don't know enough to engage with me, that shift changes the entire nature of the conversation. And by the time both of them move into discussing Aristotle and potency and actuality, the conversation has shifted into genuinely interesting philosophical territory. Two people who clearly care deeply about these questions, approaching them from completely different directions, and neither one willing to give an inch. That kind of tension is rare, and it is exactly what makes this exchange worth watching more than once. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.